Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Wrestling Reviews. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we look back at Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling's November 28th, 1981 show. Before we get to the review, be sure to click that subscribe button. We'll have more wrestling show reviews as well as the Lucha World podcast and other content available. This episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling was taped on November 25th, 1981 at the WPCQ TV studios in Charlotte, North Carolina, and aired on November 28th, 1981. Bob Caudle and David Crockett are on commentary for this week's episode. To start off the show, we begin with Blackjack Mulligan and Jake the Snake Roberts beating Nikolai Volkov and Charlie Fulton after Mulligan slams Fulton and covers him for the pin. Mulligan went for the claw late in the match, but Volkov made the save. Roberts came in and drop-kicked Volkov out of the ring, and that allowed Mulligan to get the win for his team. Thought this match was okay at best, which was not saying a lot for this. Really just a quick tag match to open things up for the show. Post-match interview with Bob Caudle has Blackjack Mulligan apologizing for being a bit out of shape. He then asked the fans what they thought of the Texas Connection team he has with Jake the Snake Roberts. Blackjack ends talking about being impressed with the amount of talent in the Mid-Atlantic territory. Up next, we get matchmaker Sandy Scott joining Bob Caudle and David Crockett to talk about trying to bring in big-time talent to the territory. He again mentions the tournament where the winner will get a Cadillac. Sergeant Slaughter interrupts them and mentions he was the number one talent in the world. He also agrees with Scott that he wants more talent in the territory, but he says that it is due to no one being any good that's already there. They then re-air the Tommy Rich versus Tony Russo match, but this time they have Sergeant Slaughter and Sandy Scott joining in on commentary. Roddy Piper then joins them. Slaughter and Piper talk about having a match for the Cadillac. Rich botched the Thesz press attempt during this video clip that they were showing, which led to Piper and Slaughter actually covering up by saying Russo countered the move with a belly punch. That was actually surprising considering them being the heels, and I think in previous shows they had actually made jokes about how unimpressive they were with guys because they were working against guys who didn't look particularly, they were either too small of an opponent or they didn't seem like they were very talented. But this time they actually covered for Tommy Rich against Tony Russo. They then followed with a video of Angelo Mosca versus Steve King, with Piper and Slaughter still there. Slaughter praises Mosca for being big and vicious, but says he'll beat him anyway. Blackjack Mulligan makes his return and says he's not number one, but he makes people sweat, and says his family told him to win the Cadillac. They talk about Angelo Mosca, and Mulligan calls him the filthiest wrestler and pro football player that ever played. They show Mulligan a video recap of Big John Studd slapping Blackjack Mulligan Jr., who is Barry Windham. That was his name he was using at this time. And Mulligan says he wants payback on Studd for doing what he did to his son. Sergeant Slaughter then returns and starts calling Wahoo McDaniel Squahoo McDaniels. He talks about how the previous week he brought a contract for a match and Wahoo didn't sign it. Sarge says he'll defend the title against anyone else. He also says that if anyone can break out of the Cobra Clutch, he will give them $1,000. Slaughter then talks about his new protege, Jim Nelson, who is in the next match. Private Jim Nelson beats Keith Larson with the Cobra Clutch. Slaughter stays on commentary and praises Nelson throughout the match and talks about how he's changed him from being a loser and a boy into a man. I thought this was an okay match and some early back and forth until Nelson caught Larson with his clothesline and applied the Cobra Clutch for the win. That was really about it. Like I said, just an okay match. This episode was very much filled with a lot of okay matches, which it's what you expect from early 1980s TV episodes of wrestling. You didn't always get memorable matches, and at times you didn't get anything at all because it depended on what they were trying to do, and a lot of it's more them trying to promote upcoming shows more than anything else. Ricky Steamboat brings a plastic bag for an interview with Bob Caudle. He mentions Piper told him that he has to prove himself before he gives him a match. Steamboat shows that in the plastic bag that he has brought along, there are tons of letters from fans that want him to wrestle Piper. He says he has 3 bags full of letters and wants to get them to the NWA so they can agree to the match he wants with Roddy Piper. Next match that airs is the Ninja with Jim Holiday beating Vinny Valentino after a diving headbutt. The Ninja brought along a sword into the ring and the referee quickly tells him he can't have that in the ring. The Ninja attacked Valentino and pretty much that's about it. Pretty short match that was okay for a TV match again. We then get to the main event, which was the best match on the card. Ole Anderson and Roddy Piper beat Don Kernoodle and Tony Anthony after Ole got Anthony to submit with an armbar. This had a lot of quick tags from Ole and Piper throughout, with them working an Anderson's type of match, focusing on a specific body part in the match. David Crockett mentioned how Gene Anderson is out with an injury, but he still shows up ringside as a manager. This was the best match on the show, like I said, with a good pace, with Ole and Piper dominating most of the match, with their opponents doing a great job of bumping and selling for them. After the match, Piper can be overheard asking if Tony Anthony is still alive. Ole and Piper get back in the ring and beat on Anthony and Kernoodle a little more. Rick Steamboat and Jake Roberts run out and they brawl with Ole and Piper. After that, Steamboat and Roberts join Bob Caudle to talk about how upset they are with what just happened. They say they are getting fed up with what Piper, Ole, and others are doing against their opponents during matches. And that's the end of the show. I thought this was an okay show. Some of the video features were repeats from the previous week. The main event was pretty entertaining, including the post-match brawl. Sergeant Slaughter was great in his interviews and on commentary. He also set up the continuation of his Cobra Clutch challenge, which was a great part of his early run in the territory. So like I said, overall, you see a lot of the heels overrunning the promotion on shows every week just to build up the baby faces making their comebacks on house shows. So really the TV is very much dominated by the heels. Like I said, just on interviews, everything, they get a little bit more of a shine. Later on we get a lot of more as we go through Mid-Atlantic, we get a little more of the enhancement talent kind of getting a little more of an opportunity to speak, because a lot of these guys end up being very talented down the road and having long careers within pro wrestling. Like I said, guys like Tony Anthony and Don Kernoodle, who at this time were pretty much just guys there to like help get over the heels, they end up becoming bigger names as we go along. Fun show. Like I said, even though I thought the matches were okay and it was an okay show, it's still an entertaining show. It's fun to see guys like Roddy Piper, Sergeant Slaughter, Ole Anderson, Jake Roberts, so many of the guys that you're more used to not seeing maybe a couple years later. For me, specifically, just because I started watching wrestling probably like 3 or 4 years later. So it's fun seeing these guys before that. Also, a lot of the, like I said, seeing the enhancement talent before they become bigger names. It's very cool. That's it for this week's review. Be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, and we'll be back again soon with more reviews.